Welcome to this podcast. My name's Andrew Fawkes of petrolheadswelcome.com. One of my other roles is as an area representative of the Aston Martin Owners Club, which I have been for about a dozen years. And during that time I met a remarkable gentleman, Michael Pye, who became something of a friend and sadly no longer with us. But Michael had an interesting background and I was keen to record some of his story. And the reason for that, first of all, Michael bought a new Aston Martin DB6 back in 1966 and retained that car until he died, and his son now still drives the car. But perhaps more importantly in this context, Michael was present in the crowd at Le Mans in 1959 when Aston Martin won the 24-hour race outright for the first and only time. And I've seen quite a few books and video articles and so forth about that success, but they're all written from the team's perspective or from the pit lane, or from the driver's perspective. I've never seen anything written from the perspective of somebody in the crowd. So I thought it'd be quite interesting to capture that. But perhaps even more reason to do so was that a few weeks later Michael was also present at Goodwood when a remarkable drive by Stirling Moss that included a fire in the pits and all kinds of other drama eventually won that race for Aston Martin and also won them the World Sports Car Championship, again for the first and only time. And I thought with that unique perspective on those events all those years ago, it'd be good to capture them, resulted in this podcast, which I hope you enjoy. I'm here at the home of Michael Pye, Michael and Rosemary Pye, in Stoneyston in North Somerset. And today is Sunday, the 12th of April 2015. And it's a rather pleasant day. It's a bit breezy, but the sun's shining, which is nice. Michael, let's start with a potted history of Michael Pye. Just tell me in 2 or 3 minutes.
Oh God.
A bit about you.
Oh Lord. Date of birth, 20th of August 1932, which means I'm 82. I was born in Croydon. My father was the son of a man who'd started a transport company. He started in 1919. 1st of May, and the vehicle was an AEC Y type with a Tyler Tiger engine. Grandfather started the business, one vehicle, 1st of May 1919, and it went on and on and on, getting bigger and bigger. I just ran the engineering department. Mind you, we were the second largest privately owned road transport and warehousing organisation in the country.
And when was that?
Up to 1970.
Right. That's great. That gets us into the swing of things. Thank you. But as you know, our main point of being here is your reminiscence, particularly about Aston Martin.
Yeah.
So let's go back to 1959.
Yeah.
And let me start by asking you, and how did you come to decide to travel to France in 1959?
I'm glad you asked that, because coming from a wheels background, of course, I'd always been interested in motorsport, not necessarily motor racing, but motorsport. In my 20s and early 30s, I did a lot of rallying, club rallying. I mucked around in Somerset and to a lesser extent in London with two friends of mine who all came from this area. In the early 50s, Jaguar were becoming very, very prominent at Le Mans particularly, and at other motor racing circuits. They won at Le Mans 51, 53, 55, 6 and 7. John Blue and Tony Long and I decided that in 58 we would go to Le Mans because we thought Jaguar were going to win again. So we flew over. I can't remember where we flew from, but the aircraft, which was a DC-4, landed at Tours. Then we coached from Tours up to the circuit, and we were there, of course, for 30 odd hours. But Ferrari won. The two drivers were Phil Ile and Olivier Gendebien. It was significant to mention that because when we get on to 59, they appear again.
So the passion for British motorsport had got you there.
Oh yes, definitely.
And then Ferrari went and spoiled your trip, I guess.
Yes,
did they? Or,
they were by then experienced Le Mans competitors. One has to remember, mind you, that their reputation, Ferrari was a relatively new team.
And you mentioned that in '58 you had paddock passes.
Yeah.
Did you have the same arrangement for '59?
Yeah.
So you've got there, you've parked up in the circuit. You
wandered
you didn't have to find your bearings. You knew where you were going, I guess.
That's right.
So where did you then make for in order to watch the race?
We had grandstand seats. Mind you, the layout at Le Mans then was vastly different from what it is today.
Indeed, yeah.
There's none of these enormous great balconies and stuff over the pits. So you know, what are they?
Grandstands. Yeah.
Grandstand. In those days, there was something called the Welcome Cafe, which if you had a pit pass, you could. By the way, the pit pass didn't allow you to actually go into the pits. It allowed you to circulate above the pit and behind the pits. On the pitch side of the circuit.
Yeah.
So Tony and I wandered into the Welcome Cafe, and the cafe, it was quite big. In those days, the inner side of the circuit was banked with it was a hedge at the top. The cars left the pit after the Le Mans start and came up, curving round to the right, under the Dunlop Bridge, because I think they've moved the Dunlop Bridge.
Right.
But under the Dunlop Bridge, and off to the circuit, the S's, and then down to Mulsanne. We were in there and we were wandering about all over the place, and during the night Tony went to sleep in the car and I wandered about, and I was in the, what do you call it, the social
the hospitality bit?
Hospitality, yes.
Right, yeah.
Yes, that's right, because I remember meeting a chap from Castrol. We used an awful lot of fuel and Castrol in the family business.
I bet you did, yeah.
So Je suis de Castrol Publicité France, which was that. So that's how I know I was in that. During the night, in those days, the layout was pits on the track level. Then there were the hospitality suites above there, and then to the general public, the next layer.
Right.
Oh, the start, yes. I do want to mention one thing, and that is anybody who's watched Le Mans in the past that Stirling Moss has been competing in will know that he used to set his watch the same as the starter's watch, and anybody that's seen a Le Mans start will know that Moss is always across the track first before anyone else, and there are many film taken of the start and cars streaming away, but there's always one car missing because he's gone. He's under the Dunlop Bridge and away, and that's what they did in '59. Moss was deputed with race number 4 to go out and break up the Ferraris, and he was eminently successful because he went like a scalded cat, and eventually all but one of the Ferrari team retired.
Yeah, because they had the edge, didn't they, apparently, in was it general speed, overall performance?
General overall performance.
Yeah. But
the Astons were better on road holding, and I mean, Salvadori would always tell you that he'd rather have an Aston at Goodwood than anything else, because the Astons are better on road holding, and they were better on road holding than the Jaguar and the Ferrari. And
at Goodwood and at Le Mans.
Yeah.
And we'll come on to Goodwood, of course, a bit later on in your story.
Yeah. Anyway, the start went, and away they went, and it went on and on and on, and eventually the only Ferrari works car that was left was number 14, and it was the same car that had won 1958, driven by Philil and Olivier Gendebien again.
Right, yeah.
In the night, I was up above looking down into the Aston pit, and Salvadori came in, not a scheduled stop. He said and it was so quiet, because you see, by about 1 o'clock in the morning, there's lots of cars are retired, and there weren't many people about. I could hear what he said. He said, there's a banging noise coming from the back. It's making the car shudder. I don't know what it is. Anyway, Reg Parnell said, well, you better go out and let it develop. Now, I cannot tell you what Roy Salvadori said, because I don't know what he said, but I think it might have been, "It's all right for you."
Yeah.
The bloody car's falling to bits. But it wasn't. Because, of course, it was number 5. It was the winning car. By then, Moss had retired.
Yeah. On lap 70, I think. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, Moss, mind, had driven the Ferraris. There was only one works Ferrari left, and that was number 14. Salvadori went out and proceeded steadily round, and then came in for the scheduled stop. Fuel, oil, everything else, and any wheels that wanted changing. So they jacked up the rear, because by then, mind you, Aston Martin had fitted hydraulic jacks built in, much quicker than Ferrari or Jaguar or anyone else.
Right.
Who had to come along and do this and all the rest of it, you see. Parnell, I heard him say, "Put it in gear and rev it up." And you could hear it going like that.
Yeah.
And what it was, they took the wheel off. Avon were out straight away, near side rear. Bang, 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 wheel off, there it was. It was a piece of metal had entered a tyre, and there was a big flap about that size, which was banging against the bodywork.
So it was a tyre?
Yeah.
But it hadn't obviously
it was a tyre.
pierced the tyre so you didn't let the air out. Gosh,
oh yeah,
that was lucky.
Somebody dropped some metal somewhere, and it hadn't got off. Anyway, so new tyres all round, that was it, and they were away. And then the race became boring. Everybody, all the Brits were all wandering round with upset faces, and by chance, of course, it was the same car and the same 2 drivers. So everybody was saying, "It's the same as last year all over again," until this bloke came on about 2 or 3 minutes past 12. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "you will not be expecting me now. You will want to know that number 14 Ferrari has been in the pits, and it's been there for 2.5 minutes. And Tony and I were over to the hedge like a long dog." And in those days, when you got to the edge of the Welcome Cafe, you could look straight down the pit lane. And sure enough, the only car that was in the pit lane was number 14. And there was one fitter underneath and another fitter upside down in the car. And as we watched, the bloke that was in the car got out, and he went like that. She was out.
So that was it. Yeah.
That was it. And big sighs of relief all round. And then the English commentator came on again, and he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm coming on again to tell you that number 14 Ferrari has retired, and at number 5 Aston Martin is in the lead." Even telling you now, I could almost cry.
And the people around you at the time, you're elated.
Yeah.
Tell me about the other people around you.
There were cheers. Rather unsporting cheers. As soon as the bloke said, "Number 14 Ferrari has retired," you could hear the cheers all around us. It's not very sporting, but anyway, that's life, and that's motor racing.
What happened at the end of the race? So we've now got the unsporting cheering.
Yeah.
At the point we get the news that Aston's now leave first and second.
Well,
we've still got a few hours to go, haven't we?
Yes, 4 hours to go. The first thing was that they'd moved, by the way, several years before, I expect, the pit signalling down to the end of the Mulsanne Straight. As they came round the corner at the end of the Mulsanne Straight, they picked up the pit signals on the right. The Reg Parnell had rung them through and said, "Put out E's, E-Z-E." And he brought number 6, Fairman, and the other bloke was a Belgian, I can't remember his name, I keep forgetting his name. He brought them up, and the 2 of them were then circulating until the end of the race.
Is that Paul Frere?
Frere, yeah. Frere, Belgian. Paul Frere. Yeah, Frere and Fairman. Anyway.
So what does the EZE stand for?
Ease.
Just ease off?
Slow up, ease off, yeah.
Okay.
And so they revolved the number 6 caught up with number 5, and they were revolving. And when they got to the end, the French bloke who was finishing them with the checkered flag, he tried to make either Shelby or Salvadori, I think it was Shelby, go round and do another lap, because they wanted to drop the checkered flag when a French car went past, which was going to get the index of performance for the size, and they wanted to drop the flag for a French car. See? But I suspect that Shelby told them what to do, because he didn't pull punches. and that was that. But it was a phenomenal feeling.
Had you already decided to go to Goodwood later that year? Or?
No. I was a member of the BARC at that time. I had a Goodwood members pass. We used to go regularly, friends of mine and I, and Rosemary sometimes. It was important, 59.
Because they'd won at Nürburgring, they'd won at Le Mans, so this was a big showdown.
But the story about Nürburgring, by the way, which is worth mentioning briefly, is that Aston had won at the Nürburgring in 57 and 58 with the DBR1, with a full works team. And Moss was sure that he could win again with a DBR1. Now, David Brown didn't want to go to Nürburgring because he wanted to concentrate on Le Mans. But Stirling persuaded Parnell that he could take one car. So they took one car. It was a bit eventful because they were leading with one car, and then Fairman was forced almost into the ditch by another car he was overtaking. The car swerved and he finished up half in the ditch. But by brute force, Fairman managed to lever it back onto the circuit. But by then they dropped from first to about fifth. Anyway, Fairman jumped out, Moss jumped in, and within 10 laps or something like that, he was in first position again. So he'd done it, and that was the Nürburgring. Then they went to Le Mans, then they went to Goodwood. And what happened at Goodwood, Salvadori's car caught fire because a mechanic who was putting fuel in had done something. When he pulled the nozzle out, one or two drips had dribbled down onto a hot exhaust, and it went woof. Here again, Stirling Moss pulled Aston's irons out of the fire because, of course, Salvadori's car was, it wasn't written off, it was restored and came back. But the Whitehead brothers, who had the next pit, they vacated and handed it over to the works. Moss jumped into Fairman's car and worked his way up through the field and eventually won it. And that clinched it.
And where were you when all this was happening? Whereabouts in Goodwood?
Opposite the pits. And the smoke, you've never seen it like it. It was astonishing.
Was it blowing your way or blowing the other way?
No, I don't know why it wasn't blowing our way, because it is, after all, 55 years on. The Porsches were a bloody nuisance that day.
In what way?
Well, they kept getting in the way. I mean, they're all right, they were doing very well, and of course since then they've done extraordinarily well at Le Mans and so on. But they anyway, Mossy did it, and I think that looking over the years, Moss and Salvadori have done more for the Aston Martin team than anyone else. Absolutely brilliant. Happy days, good Lord.
What does it feel like to be one of those few people who was around in 1959 to see that famous Aston Martin year?
Well, I don't know. I hopefully I'm going to share it with other people, because it was something.
Well, thank you, Michael, and here you are indeed sharing it with other people as you hoped. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. I'm Andrew Fawkes. If you have any comments or questions or suggestions for future podcasts, please contact me at info@petrolheadswelcome.com. Thank you.